Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Martin. I'm the General Manager of Marketing at Casio. And today we have a very special program. Obviously, I think everybody knows this has been a challenging year. And it's, of course, always challenging in music education. And so today we assembled a series of guests to talk about some ways that schools can navigate some special funding that can be available to help them with the upcoming school year. So first guest I want to bring in is Mr. Anthony Patterson. He is a Casio artist and the Casio consultant for music education. How are you doing today, Anthony?
Doing fine, Mike. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. All right. And next, I want to bring in Mr. Bob Morrison. He is the CEO of Quadrant Research and an expert in these types of, I guess, Bob, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself. Welcome to the program, Bob.
Thank you. Yes, Quadrant Research is one of the nation's leading arts education research and policy organizations. We oversee the National Arts Education Data Project, which reports on the status and condition of arts education programs, working with state agencies across the country. And in addition to that, I also am the director for Arts Ed New Jersey, the statewide arts education advocacy organization for New Jersey. And it's through that work where we've been spending a lot of time analyzing, reporting on, and providing guidance on the various ways that the ESSER funds can be used to support arts education across the country.
So in a nutshell, can you tell us a little bit about ESSER funds and how this is different from other types of funding that's been available in the past?
Sure. Well, the ESSER funds in particular are funds that are dedicated specifically to help with K-12 education. It is part of the all of the various coronavirus relief packages that have come out. And so there have been actually three different batches of funding that has come out from the various coronavirus package. The first one was the CARES Act, which was signed into law in March of 2020. The second one was the COVID relief package that was signed into law in December of 2020. Or many people have called that kind of like CARES 2. And then you have the American Rescue Plan, which was passed by the Senate and signed by President Biden in March of 2021. Each of those got increasingly bigger, and each of those for education got increasingly larger as well. So you went from 30 billion in CARES 1 to 82 billion in the December CARES 2 package, and then 168 billion in the American Rescue Plan. But the funds that are targeted toward K-12 education in particularly are the emergency funds for elementary and secondary education. And that's where the name comes from. ESSER is the Emergency Elementary and Secondary Education Relief Fund, or ESSER. And these funds that have been provided have about 16 different categories of spending that the funds can be utilized for. And as I mentioned, they got increasingly larger over the period of time. So think about it in terms of the first batch of ESSER funds that came out. When compared to the current batch, most districts are receiving 9 times the amount of money that they received in the first ESSER funding batch. So the whole idea is that the ESSER funds are a subset of the coronavirus relief packages, but these particular funds, the ESSER funds, are specifically targeting and are funneled through our local school districts to support things that are related to COVID-19, things that are related to reopening our schools, and things that are related to ensuring our students have the resources they need to succeed as our schools move forward.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you for the incredible overview, Bob. That's truly amazing. So I also want to bring in another guest that we have here today, Matt MacFarlane, Executive Director at the PIMS School. And, Matt's here because, well, Matt has already gone through this process and his school has received some funding. So welcome to the broadcast, Matt. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. So let's see if I can bring us all in here together here at once so we can continue this discussion. And Matt, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, well, the process. How easy was this to do? Any advice you can give to other schools and educators in terms of pursuing these funds and doing this application?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in Minnesota, and we're a 9-12 performing arts high school, charter school. We're not a huge school, but we have about 350 to 400 students, and this year obviously has been a challenge, and we're really looking forward to moving forward next year in a more predictable fashion. I think I can probably speak for every administrator and teacher in the country and saying, yeah, summer's looking pretty good right now. So the process in Minnesota was really dictated by state, and we have to apply for these grants, and there's depending on which ESSER funding iteration we're talking about, there's different levels of control and different levels of things you can use them for. But I think the positive thing, just like Bob was mentioning, the money got larger as with each version of the support, and the restrictions became less stringent. So our students have benefited greatly from this federal funding. I mean, we've been able to enable programming throughout the year that we wouldn't be able to do. We were able to support our students that were in distance learning with technology, with recording equipment, with keyboards, with things that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to support them with.
Right.
And I think that's looking in the rearview mirror, and looking forward is kind of where we're at. How do you, let's say you're a teacher in a district right now, and you're tuning in, and you're like, how do I get some of this Casio gear out to some kids so they can work on maybe some of the learning that they missed out over the school year, maybe over the summer. And you're not a person that probably is making that decision. I'm guessing there's someone at the district level that's making these sort of calls. I think a strong case can be made that the ability for students to continue to learn throughout the summer with I don't know what piece of equipment I would push, the Casio tone, maybe probably not the Grand Hybrid for this one, but the students could gain over the summer, the ability to kind of do these distant lessons now is an amazing thing. The lessons that have happened over Zoom, everyone's a little more comfortable in that setting. But I think, I have teachers now, we've empowered our teachers to come forward and make suggestions with how we can help students with this money. That's what we look for. We're looking for input from teachers and for ways to support the students, because they're the ones whose voice in our situation that is really the most important. I know districts are going to be looking at different ways to use this money, but it would be hard to say that helping, kind of buoy the musical education of our students wouldn't be important.
Great, guys. Thank you for being here. It's good to see people. I'm up in northern Michigan and no one is here yet, so I'm kind of by myself. Robert, what Matt said is that he had, was looking in the rearview mirror. How should we look forward with these funds? I mean, it's an enormous opportunity. What do you think?
Well, I think, part of looking in the rearview mirror is that the ship has sailed on ESSER, on the CARES Act 1 and CARES 2, or the first two batches of basically ESSER relief. ESSER 3 is where the discussion is right now, because a lot of the guidance for the use of funds has just recently come out from states. And the states have extended the deadline period, for the application process for those funds. So, looking forward, it's like how do you utilize these funds, as Matt had said, related to accelerating learning over the summertime. That can be done with music camps. A lot of places are talking about, okay, we're going to have our students come in for summer learning instruction, and many of the schools should be including music instruction along with that, or arts instruction, to help break up just the normal academic summer work that may be going on. But additionally to that, this has been a year where we've had a lot of students that have not been able to participate in their music programs because they were completely remote. Some students that have actually opted out because they were not interested in trying to learn how to do an instrument, remotely. And as a result, there's going to be a need to surge staffing to really recruit and recoup kind of a lost year of students. And I think that that's a valuable use of the resources as well. There's an awful lot of talk about remediation, but I always point out that learning loss, and I'm not a fan of that terminology, but I think it's more like learning delay. But learning delay is not the sole province of language arts, literacy, and math. All of our content areas have had delays in learning, and I would argue that music and the arts have had some of the greatest delays because in many parts of the country, they weren't allowed to conduct their programs. And in some places, that included even remotely. So these funds are an opportunity to help jumpstart our programs, help reinvigorate them, because we are going to be rebuilding for the next few years. In our music programs. And I think that that's something that we just have to recognize, embrace, and then look at, okay, how do we utilize these funds? How might they be able to be invested wisely in a way to support our programs? And, the other thing that Matt talked about is, getting to the decision maker, and part of that is, if these funds are available, and if you as a music educator have some ideas on how the funds should be used, you should be reaching out to your supervisor, your principal, or your administration to find out what their plans are for the funds, because the districts are responsible for engaging in community feedback on their plans for the use of funds. There is an important component of stakeholder engagement that is part of this, and as the educator, understanding, hey, what are we going to do with these funds, or have you thought about how you're going to utilize the funds? And oh, by the way, I have some ideas on how they can be supportive of my program. That is definitely something that an educator can do right now. The one thing that we like to tell everyone is that if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
That's right. Bob, you had a couple of great points. I think your point on learning loss is spot on. I think I like the reference to pacing. It's you're going to learn. You're just pacing it at a different. And who are you following behind? Right? Who are you following
exactly
behind? Everyone had the same experience, right? This is a universal experience. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's.
Go ahead.
I think that's the whole idea of this fallacy of learning loss. And there was some research that came out of Katrina. That's the previous large system disruption that we had in the United States came out of Katrina. And when they tried applying remediation strategies, the remediation strategies didn't work any nearly as well as the strategies that focused on learning acceleration, which was based on pacing, which is based on meeting them where they are and bringing them forward and not looking at them and going, you should be here. So now we are going to, we're going to focus all our energy on cramming as much information into your brain right now. I think that's one of the huge dangers that lie in front of us, is that if we come back into the new school year and the first thing we do for kids is going, you're behind, therefore we're going to cram this stuff down your throat, is going to be completely detrimental to education, because our kids don't need to have things taken away from them as soon as they come back into school. We need to focus on how do we address all of their needs, including their need to be able to express themselves based on everything that they've gone through in the past year. And the way that they do that is through their engagement with music programs, including being engaged in their arts programs. And so we can't be focused on this remediation mentality. We really need to be focused on how do we bring our kids back into schools? How do we get them reacclimated to being together into this building? How do we make them feel safe before they're going to be ready to learn?
Yeah, I'm going to bring you to my board meeting. That's great. No, my board's great.
I am a sitting board member, by the way, so I'm used to that.
All right, we'll get you on our board too. I think one of the things that I think as an admin right now we're obviously looking towards fall, and one of the things that we're thinking about is we don't know what the situation will be in the fall. Maybe we're going to have to do some mitigation strategies again. I don't think you'll see the full shutdown of schools like you saw this past year. I don't see an appetite for that. So that's going to require us all to be even more creative with how we execute what we do. I mean, if you had told me in the fall of like 2019 that one of the most dangerous activities you could do in 2020 would be sing in a choir, I mean, come on, yeah. Right? So what we're going to have to figure out is how can we continue to do and provide these situations of normalcy in perhaps a modified way. Like choir, you may need that may call for additional equipment. You may have to be able to do choir outside. You may have to have a portable keyboard you can do that with. You may have to be able to spread out into multiple rooms. You may not have enough pianos for that. You may not have enough music stands. These are the things that all can kind of fall in your ESSER funding. And I love the point that, as an administrator, I want to hear people coming to me with great suggestions as to how to meet these students' needs. I don't sit here and say I'm the know be all know all in our school situation. The teachers that are in the trenches are the ones that know. So they need to be driving the conversation.
Well,
yeah, and I think that's a good point regarding, there are these 16 categories on how you can use the funds. And that includes, utilizing it for PPE supplies and, mitigation strategies in order to make sure, or in order to combat a respiratory viral spread, which includes COVID-19. But in addition to that, one of the things to think about, particularly as we prepare to return to school, we now have the research. We now know how aerosols are generated and spread in performing arts activities. And we also know that as more and more people get vaccinated and as the requirements become looser and looser, that in many places that schools are going to be coming back in without mask requirements, without social distancing and things of that nature. And if there aren't those requirements in the school, there shouldn't be those requirements in performing arts. Now, if there is a viral spread or if there is a mask mandate, for example, we've learned what we can do, using mitigation strategies for our singers and performing arts and musicians. You'll need to mask the instruments, you'll need to mask the singers. But if there isn't a mask requirement, there's not a need for there to be a requirement in the performing arts. So whatever the upcoming mitigation strategies are for all students will ultimately be what will be applicable to the performing arts as well. But if you do need to have mask supplies, PPE does fall under this guidance. And if you have to rehearse outside, setting up the staging or any other things that you need to do to create the environment to do that, whether it's, sound, whether it's keyboards, things to make that work, that absolutely falls within the guidelines of the use of funds.
HVAC modification, room modification, equipment. I mean, it's so open right now. And I think another thing to take into consideration is some of the timeline for some of these funding is all the way through 2023. So there's not an urgency, and you're able to kind of space out. Schools are able to space out based on their needs, which is really helpful for us because we don't know what 21, 22 is going to look like. We certainly don't know what 22, 23 is going to look like. So there's that ability to kind of pace, which is good.
So, Anthony, did you have a question? You were about to chime in a minute ago.
Yeah, I thought one of the 19 focus points is the emotional health of the students. And I think that an argument for the arts lies in there. What do you guys think?
Well, I certainly agree. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time and energy prior to the pandemic focusing on the connection between music and arts education and social emotional learning, and how SEL can be embedded within the framework of music and arts instruction to really engage with our students. Because after all, music in particular is social. It is a social activity. You see it in the picture of students interacting with one another in their ensembles and things of that nature. And we all know that music is inherently emotional. I mean, there is, you can't listen to a piece of music without feeling some sort of emotion, even if that emotion is ambivalence, right? You know, that there is, so these things are to a certain degree inherent, but the key for educators is how to intentionally unlock that and to motivate and connect those aspects of arts learning to the students to really engage them in a meaningful ways around the area of SEL. So we've talked a lot about that here in New Jersey and around the country about the importance of the connection between social emotional learning and arts education. And you're absolutely right. You know, item number 10 talks about the mental health and well-being of students, and that's specifically related to social emotional learning. And with the ESSER 3 funds, which is this biggest tranche of funding that's coming out, 20% of those funds need to be dedicated to supporting both learning loss and social emotional learning. So there's targeted funds in there that can be tapped into from a music educator standpoint if they're utilizing those funds in a way that is engaging and addressing social emotional learning needs of students.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It seems also that these funds are not just for Title I schools, but most schools. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, they're available for
Nash.
all schools. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. I was just going to talk from Minnesota. In Minnesota, they're all broken down. Like every school based on size receives a piece of this pie. So larger schools obviously are getting a bigger chunk, but we're getting, you know, it's still enough. It's still enough money to be very significant in our budget, you know.
Beautiful.
And I think what's important here is, and there's a little bit of confusion that comes up because it was the formula that was used to come up with how the funds would be distributed was a Title I formula. So it was the Title I formula that was utilized, but it's not governed by Title I regulations. It has their own guidelines specifically for the ESSER funds. So just because it's been the formula that was used was the Title I formula, sometimes people confuse that it can only be utilized, you know, in Title I fashion. And in states, you know, that, you know, every state has schools that are not Title I schools. They've been able to establish at least minimal levels of support for those schools so that every school is getting something.
That's fantastic. So I just want to back up a little bit. So, you know, we've got, I think, some educators watching us. We might even have some Casio music dealers watching us. So I guess I want to have two questions. If you're a school music teacher and obviously you're seeing this as an opportunity and maybe your school hasn't been as involved as they should have been this past year in getting involved with some of the funds that are now passed, but now obviously there's opportunity here and money is always needed in music education. What's the first step a music educator should make?
Find out how much money your district's getting.
All right. So go to the district. Yep.
Either go to the district or you can go to usually the State Department of Education website if they want, you know, if they want to do it discreetly and you know, they can go to the Department of Ed. But each of the state departments of education usually have a document there that lists the breakdown of funds for each of the three tranches. So there should be an ESSER 3 PDF or a spreadsheet that they can take a look at and just find their school district and see the allocation that's there. That's right. Once they know, and they should also review kind of how the funds can be utilized, and we could point you to some resources that they can go to get some ideas. But then they should take the information to their supervisor, along with some ideas of if there is the ability for them to be used in their program, how would they suggest using it? What are their ideas? Again, as Matt said, and most principals and school administrators that I know that are worth their salt, they want to hear from the folks on the front line on how they would utilize it, how this could positively impact students. So, have that plan in mind, figure that out, and be ready to then support that with additional documentation. But, find out how much money there is, talk to your supervisor about it, develop a plan, and be creative. I mean, because this isn't, one of the other things that we talk about is this isn't about going back to March of 2020, right? We're coming into September of 2021. This is about how are we moving forward? This has not been a great year, but there are some things that have been learned that can be brought forward that have positively transformed the provision of music education in this country. And one of the big areas of transformation has been the forced implementation of technology. We've probably done in a year what probably would have taken a generation for us to accomplish in getting the adaptation of technology in the school. So as a result of that, teachers have learned how they can use technology in certain ways to augment their teaching. So how does that carry forward now that they're back in the classroom? How does it make them more efficient? How does that allow them to focus on the things that they can only do when they're in person with students, while allowing the things that can be done asynchronously to be done that way? So this is about, not reimagining yesterday. It's about imagining what the future is going to look like.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I'd echo Bob. I think you want to start by getting the information. That's great, and then start at your building level and find out what's been allocated for your building. And my guess is most schools are really focusing primarily on math and reading and the state standards based elements. Mental health for sure. I know there'll be a lot of mental health support money spent. It's a big emphasis in Minnesota right now, and rightly so. It was a struggle for a lot of kids. But I really, what would be compelling to me is if a teacher came into me and said, the combined element of social emotional learning and academic growth, you can hit both those elements right there with this one thing, with focusing on arts and music and that would be a very powerful argument. It would be hard for me to not see merit in that. Of course, I'm a pianist, but that's.
Well, these are the types of reasons. This is why Casio is having this webinar today. This is why Casio got involved in music 41 years ago, is to help bring the enjoyment, to bring music to more people, to help them with their daily lives. And this is what we're talking about today, just at a more local level, and obviously at the education level. So again, huge thanks for all of your insight. So I did want to put up here on the screen, we do the website that was mentioned earlier is the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's a good place to start to look for some information on the ESSER grant and some of this funding, and other places people should go. I know, Bob, you had some information you had on your screen that maybe you wanted to share. Don't know if you had a video actually. I don't know if the audio will work, but we're going to give it a try.
So what we're going to do is, I noticed that I should be able to share a Chrome tab, and that I can share the audio from that Chrome tab. So I'm going to try that. So let's see if this is going to work.
All right.
What if Wynton Marsalis never had trumpet lessons? Or Misty Copeland didn't have a dance studio? Or what if Governor Murphy never got inspired by his theater teacher? We can be great when we get what we need to learn and grow through the arts. The arts help us learn better and be creative. It's more than being a musician, dancer, or artist. We learn how to stick with things, and we learn how to solve problems creatively. And that makes it more fun to go to school. There is a way for us to get the instruments, art supplies, and programs we need. It's called ESSER 3. and it's bringing $2.4 billion to New Jersey to help schools bounce back after the pandemic. Teachers can come up with a plan for what our schools and students need. It can be art supplies, instruments, and funds for shows and exhibits. It can be for more teachers. It can be for summer programs and camps. With this money, students can put on concerts and plays and exhibits. When this happens, everyone can come and see what we can do and all the talents that we have. We can invite family, friends, and neighbors, even elected officials. We really missed being together last year. Doing things together again will feel great and help others feel great too. Most schools will get 9 times more than they got last summer. Here's what you can do. Learn how much money your district is getting. Tell your supervisor what you learned. Ask if some of the money can be used for your arts education program. Make a plan. If you don't ask, you don't get. So ask. Ask for me. Ask for all your students. With all of our creative ideas, we can expand arts ed now. Learn more at artsednj.org/ESSER. That's ESSER. ESSER.
So obviously we set that up for our New Jersey folks, but the resources that are there are at the Arts Ed.
I think you're good, Bob.
But I think, all right. But I think the information that is at artsednj.org/ESSER includes guidance that applies to anybody. It's focused and targeted on New Jersey, but the information that's there could be used by anyone, and it's got links to a lot of the other resources that are out there that support ESSER funds.
That's a great video. We can't hear you, Mike.
I'm sorry, I did mute myself there for a moment. So, yeah, that's an outstanding video, and we'll be sure to get that up on Casio Social. And again, that's pertaining to New Jersey, as you said, but something, there are similar resources nationwide. Outstanding.
Question, guys. Okay, back to the moving forward, which is an interesting way to say it. Matt, do you foresee some kind of hybrid learning in the future? I mean, we're always kind of thinking about what we can take away from this that is kind of great.
Yeah, I think if you ask most teachers and students that the hybrid was not the easiest way to exist.
Okay.
But I will say that I think some utilizing the ability to do some asynchronous learning would be highly beneficial, not as the default mode. I would say with our high school kids, they need to be here. They need to be in our orbit. They need to, we're a community here. It's a community school. We're if you're not in the community, you feel isolated, and as an artist, all of these young artists feel, and they're high school kids, so they feel times 50, right? But we're certainly looking for ways to continue to offer opportunities and expand learning for kids that may have transportation situations after school, or maybe there'll be a day in the quarter that we do an asynchronous day, and we're able to focus on, students that need learning supports. Or I definitely know that our instrumental and vocal teachers are thinking about the students that can't stick around and do lessons after school, and how can we do some lessons from a distance. So I think there's certainly opportunities there. The implementation of technology this year and the funding that has facilitated our ability to get a device in every kid's hand has been amazing, and maybe the most positive thing that's come out of this situation. But I would say, I get probably 15 to 20 emails a day right now around how I should be using my ESSER funds.
Wow.
I'm not joking. Anytime something happens in the world of education, there's businesses that pop up around it to try and make the most of the situation, and I certainly don't fault them. But I certainly believe that utilizing your funds to help your students grow in their artistic expression, help your students grow in their capabilities, certainly pays dividends down the line, and it's certainly one that, we're an art school, obviously that's how we're investing, but I would highly recommend all schools consider this in terms of their global ESSER expenditure.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think that I think Matt's right. This idea, the hybrid of some kids in the classroom and some kids at home, we're not going to see that, moving forward. There are going to certainly be students that need, because of 504, their own individual education plan. They may need to be, educated outside of the building, but that's not going to be done where they're coming into class while students are in the same class, because it is very difficult for the educator to be able to, to instruct in both levels. But to Matt's point, asynchronous is definitely, going to be an important aspect of this, particularly one of the things that we learned as it relates to music. Again, I talked about earlier, what are the things that we can do, asynchronously or remotely, and what are the things that we can only do when we're all together? And we need to focus on the things that we can only do when we're all together, when we're together, and the things that we can do asynchronously or separated, focus on that stuff. So that means, learning your notes and doing, there's some great technology on, how to learn learn the notes that you're working on, or, get some feedback that way that then can be sent to the teacher, that can be reviewed on their own, so that when the students are all together, you're focused on making music together and not going, no, that's not the right note. You need to learn these 3 notes, and teaching the music that way. It allows it allows for more effective use of time if we're focusing on what we need to do together and what can we do in an asynchronous environment. And that's definitely been true of the music programs this year.
Outstanding.
Well, and who are the students you can reach that you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach, right? I mean, that's the key. There's kids that can't stick around and do an after-school jazz band rehearsal here, perhaps because they don't have the transportation, but they could find a way to participate in an asynchronous opportunity through the technology that we now are all very familiar with.
Outstanding. Well, guys, we've taken a lot of your time, and what amazing information you've provided. I just one time around, any last minute comments or questions before we wrap up? And I know there's a few people watching on YouTube as well. If you have questions for the panel here, please don't hesitate to type them into the chat. But I don't want to take too much more of everyone's valuable time here.
The only thing that I would say is that additionally, is that, on the webpage for the U.S. Department of Education for their ESSER funds, there is a frequently asked questions document, a FAQ, that was just released at the end of May. And it was their final approved frequently asked questions document regarding the ESSER 3 funding. And that document specifically talks about the utilization of funds to support music and arts education. So if somebody tells you, oh, well, you can't use the funds for the arts, it's only for language arts literacy or math, or it's only for Title I, or it's only for this thing, you have the information from the Department of Education that is explicitly calling out utilizing the funds in support of music and arts education. So there's a lot of information out there to help you on your way, but I will leave you with the thing that I started with. If you don't ask, you don't get. So ask.
Awesome.
Outstanding.
I would say, in the words of Bob Morrison, if you don't ask, you don't get. I would echo that.
All right,
That's
everybody.
exactly what I would say too. You can't get what you don't ask for.
All right. Well, and if you do ask and you do get some of those funds, maybe you'll consider putting them towards some Casio instruments. Those dollars will go further with our products, our keyboards and pianos than anywhere else, we believe. So anyway, thank you so much, Bob, Matt, Anthony, for making this happen. Truly appreciate everyone's participation, and just this is a gold mine of information, just absolute treasure. And so if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share it to anybody that you think might need it. But thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Matt and Anthony. And we'll see you again on our next webinar. Take care.